Welcome. My name is Chris Smith, and you're listening to the Wild Vittles podcast. We're back. I've been on hiatus for quite some time, and the initial season 2 premiere episode is going to be a recap of the 2024 Montana archery elk hunt. And I have my hunting partner here, Joel Smith. Joel and I have been hunting together for quite a few years, and he's got me into duck hunting. I've got him into kayak fishing, saltwater, and now we're elk hunting partners as well, and have a few years at a time. And what I wanted to do, and people might say, did I tune into the wrong podcast because it's supposed to be about wild game cooking? I figured, hunt stories are also supposed to be part of wild game cooking as well. And I was telling Joel before we turned on the recorder that I wanted to do this just so that I'm an old man now and I'll forget what we did. And I want to kind of record this for myself, for my kids to listen to. I think it'll be good. And it was a great trip. And so I wanted to kind of start out with this hunting trip actually started not in 2024, but in the beginning of 2023, if not December of 2022. I can't remember. Do you remember, Joel, when you reached out to me?
It was, I think it may have been late 2022.
I think so.
Because we would have had time, we would have had time to think about what state to go to, whether we had enough points, research outfitters, and all that took months. I feel like.
It did take a long time. Well, it all started with a conversation, right? You reached out to me, and I had been actually with Crooked Sky and went on a Wyoming outfitted hunt. And I don't do a whole lot of outfitted hunts. And that Wyoming hunt was kind of I accidentally drew the tag, meaning I forgot to withdraw a tag and got an elk tag in the random draw in Wyoming, and was fortunate enough to punch a tag my first bull in Wyoming. And then, you had said, "Hey, what's that run?" And you were interested in it, and said, could we go together? And I don't know how I ended up with the responsibility, but I ended up with responsibility finding the outfitter, I think. Yeah. Somehow, because I'm such an expert at this point, right?
Well, I figured you had experience in some good outfitters and some not so good outfitters, and I had no experience, so I sort of like deferred to your experience in the situation to sort of research and use your use your experience to sort of glean who might be a good, what might be a good opportunity for us depending on the points we had. And I think I believe we like originated with the idea of going to Montana.
We did.
So it was just like, let's look through the options in Montana and figure out what's out there.
Now, your memory is sharper than mine, because I kind of forgot that's how we arrived at Montana. Because I think as I kind of thought about it, it was like I'd just been to Wyoming and I didn't have enough points, although you probably did, and I didn't want to be a drag on your points in Wyoming. Idaho is kind of, you may or may not go. In most of the other states, it's kind of a coin toss, and we didn't have enough for Colorado. So Montana was a natural fit from a perspective of we both had a point. We knew we could buy a point going in. And if we wanted to lock it in, you can buy a point being with an outfitter, go into the draw with 3 preference points, which is the max. So you knew you're going to draw. So you're right. That was why we picked Montana.
They had just instituted the policy of, if you don't use your points when you at the point if you don't apply for a tag when you have 2, you lose your points.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, let's go ahead and.
I don't love that system, but you got to admit it's effective in keeping kind of the points cleared out, and you can kind of count on it. So maybe it's not all bad. So we locked in on Montana, and this is where probably your faith in me is going to falter, because, it's like, well, what did Chris do to try to find an outfitter? Well, first I reached out to my outfitter in Wyoming and said, do you guys know any outfitters through outfitter associations that you would recommend in Montana? I got a 1-liner email back. We don't know nothing about those folks in Montana, is what they told me. So, okay. I went to Go Hunt, looked at their classifieds, and I contacted, I think, 5 or 6 different outfitters. And I also looked at, the ones I contacted, I looked at their information online, and I was looking for a very unique experience. And it's one that I think we were aligned on. If it said anything about side by side ATVs or a comfortable lodge, or, no need to prepare to hike or things like that, those were all out. We
Yep.
wanted we wanted horseback in. We wanted, the wall tents, like the traditional outfitter. We wanted to be in the wilderness. We wanted to be out there. And by God, I found it, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And this outfitter called us back, and we had really good conversation before I gave him my money. And so this was Montana Wilderness Lodge and Outfitter. And I looked at the website, looks like the part that I'm looking for. And really what I think I've told you this, the thing that put me over the top is there was a guy that had written an article in the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation magazine about his outfitted hunt with these folks. And I was like, this has got to be it. So we put our money forward, and we prepare, all of 2023. And then I think it was, what was it, 2 weeks
Yeah,
before we were
if
supposed to
that.
depart, that we, I reached out to him to try to figure out what we need to do the last minute, to like lodging the day before. Do we stay at their lodge? Do we need to stay somewhere in Kalispell? What are we going to do? And they said, oh, we're really glad you called. There's been a problem. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, there's a forest fire here, and the entire area is shut. And it's just completely shut down, and we're going to have to make a call whether or not we even have the hunt. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, and I didn't realize this until we actually fast forward when we went, and they said the entire actually wilderness area, all the outfitters were shut down and you couldn't come in and hunt. So our hunt got canceled 2 weeks out. So I think we were going to go like the opening weekend, and it was like we're going to be there like the Wednesday or whatever after Labor Day, and completely shut down. We ended up going to Plan B and went on a cow elk hunt in an undisclosed location elsewhere. Punched 2 tags, had a wonderful time, and came home with elk meat. And then we were able to refund our money. Thank you, state of Montana. They were able to, because we were able to provide proof that the area was shut down due to the forest fire. They refunded our license fee, our permit fee. And I didn't realize this until we actually went through the draw again, and they retained our points in the draw, which was also a bonus because I think those points are $100.
Yeah, something like that.
100
After
or
all the
50.
fees and the tax and everything, it's about $100. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So we drew again in 2024, continued to prepare, but what was it, like May? I think it was in May, and I get a text from Joel, and he said, so what do you think about our outfitter? I'm like, what? And why don't you explain what happened then?
We got an email, maybe the 1st of June, late May, 1st of June, that the outfitter had been sold to new owners, and they reached out and expressed their excitement to have us, and wanted to set up a time to talk about logistics and this and that. And it was like, oh, okay, well, that right off the bat, we've had better communication with these folks than we ever did with the guy who was running it before.
Yeah, and Joel's being kind here. We chased the previous outfitter, and he just kind of turned into an asshole all of a sudden after he had our money and our commitment, and did not want to talk to us. Thought we were bothering him. So these new owners, which are Caitlin and Stripe Daniels, are fantastic, and we'll get more into that. But Joel and I really count our lucky stars that we were deferred. Actually, the forest fire was a really good thing because we would have had a crummy experience the previous year. We had a fantastic experience this time around. So
Yep.
it was great. So, fast forward to us departing Texas to get to Montana. I call this the Lonesome Dove, trail. If you're familiar with the movie or the book, they go from South Texas all the way to Montana. Of course, they take seasons to get there. We did it in 31 hours, And that was a long damn time.
Yeah, it was just getting out of Texas is a feat by itself. And then um, we drove to the tip of Texas on day one, and then we drove from the tip of Texas and Dalhart all the way to Billings. We went all the way to Billings, Montana. Is that
We
right?
did.
Do I have
We
that right?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So that
But
second day was
don't forget
long.
that really fancy hotel you took me to in Dalhart, you know. So
The Nurse Nickel, world famous Nurse Nickel, with the
at
train
the
driving right through your hotel room 4 times a night.
when you check in, they're like, "Oh, you're going to need these," and I'm like, "What is that?" And that's like, "That's your earplugs for for the train that's across the road." I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" But I was tired enough; it didn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah, uneventful in Billings. And I thought, from there, I was like, "Oh, we're nearly there." It still felt like we had to drive to the end of the earth to get to this place. We finally arrive at the Montana Wilderness Lodge and Outfitters main lodge, and I was kind of expecting this to be, a bit of civilization. They are very rustic buildings, but it is off grid even there. And I didn't realize it, but it's in actually the national park, and they're leasing that land, and they own the structures, and it's very rustic. I mean, if you said, this was, it looks like you would imagine your grandfather's hunting camp and cabins. They had a generator in the evenings to be able to run lights. They did have Starlink, so we're able to communicate with their families. But they had like propane, lanterns in the cabin rooms, and they're just kind of like tiny little shacks. But we had a great dinner. We got to do a little bit of target practice out that evening at the beautiful valley, and that was kind of our first evening. Day zero, which was the next day, was the day before season, I think, right? So because we were going to get to hunt opening day, we rode in 5 hours just to ride in. Packed everything into a main base camp. Any comments or kind of thoughts about the ride, the
Well, I'll just
horseback?
say, so for whatever it was, a year and a half, 2 years almost, I was thinking about riding a horse for 5 hours for 15 miles. What I did not take into account was we were going to be riding horses 4 hours every day,
Every day.
every
Yeah.
single day,
Yep.
hours at a time.
Yep.
And so I have several members of my family who are horse people, and
Mm-hmm.
so I knew that I did not want to. Last time I rode a horse was like maybe high school, so
Mm-hmm.
it's been 25 years since I've been on the back of a horse. And I was thinking I'm at least gonna have to like get a few like practice rides in just so I can, sit in the saddle, get used to it, so that when I'm on the 5 hour, 15 mile ride into the base camp, staring off the side of a cliff, with my, terror of heights, it's not the first time I've been on a horse in 25 years. So I did get a few rides in long before the trip, but it did not prepare me for the, it did not prepare me for that trek. So
So so we get into camp, and it's kind of your traditional outfitter camp wall tents. There's a main camp tent. Of course, the outfitters and the wranglers, they have their own tents. We have a kind of a larger cabin tent. It's built really to accommodate probably 6 different people. It's just Joel and I, so we're able to kind of really spread out. I think there were 4 cots in there. We were able to kind of like use take a cottage to sleep on, obviously, but put our gear and stuff elsewhere. It's really handy, really nice and comfortable. The next morning, we take off early. I'm talking about real. Do you remember what time we left camp?
I think we left camp at 3:30.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Like we got up at 3, left camp at 3:30.
and for you folks that never been out west at 3:30 in the morning in the valleys in the trees, it's friggin' dark. And so we're they gave us like sack lunches and sack breakfast. You put that in your saddlebag, and we've got our packs and we've got our bows. And I was a little suspect about this. We strapped our bows to a mule and did not know if that was going to work out, but I got comfortable after kind of seeing how Stripe was putting them on there, and it thought it was going to work, and it did work. We've got our headlamps. At 3:30 in the morning, it's dark, but the horses need to be able to see in the kind of in the dark. So we were just reduced to red lamp lights, so we can kind of see where we were, and we could see an approaching branch if it was going to hit us smack in the face. So I don't know. What did you think of that first morning out?
Ignorance was bliss for me. I'm terrified of heights, and
But you couldn't
that
see the heights. Yeah.
exactly. So the first 3 hour ride in the pitch dark with just the red light was probably exactly what I needed at that moment, because if I had been able to see down the slope as what was his name, Spike or
Uh,
Stumbles. His
yeah.
nickname was Stumbles because he was lazy and he would just drag his back feet and flop all over the place. And
Yep.
a few times I thought I was, it's just this giant plow horse. Not to mention my knees and my feet are killing me because the stirrups were not adjusted appropriately. So for, whatever, 18 hours of being on that horse, it was not adjusted properly. And so by the end of the first day, just to fast forward, I actually got off and walked for about a mile and a half because it felt better than riding the horse.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
It
riding
was.
in the dark was, the first night was interesting.
Yeah, like you said. I mean, we did 3 hours, and so kind of estimation 3 miles an hour is like 9-ish miles just to get to the spot that we're going to hunt. It's not that we're just stepping out the back door, right? And Strite, it was Strite and Coulter. That's kind of another young guide wrangler that's with him. And Joel and I take off, and we've got. I think we just had horses. I think it's just the four of us each on horses. We didn't have a mule with us that time. And we took off that morning and went to a certain kind of area that he wanted to hunt up in a kind of a basin. And we get up to kind of the bottom of this edge of the basin. We're going to go up to a ridge and glass and look around. And we start, as the sun starts coming up, we kind of come out in some really open meadows. And I'm having the same trouble that Joel is. My knees are aching too on those horses for some reason. And I grew up on horses and I'm comfortable, but man, I guess it's just age and stiffness. I was having difficulty. But I was looking over at Joel, and I think we kind of pulled up next to each other, and I'm looking on the ground and I'm like, I don't see any tracks. I don't see any elk scat. I don't see anything. And I've been looking on the internet coming up here, beforehand, everybody's saying there ain't no elk up in the Bob. Oh, and I forgot to mention where we are. We're in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. It's over 1 million acres of wild country up there in northern Montana. It's just south of Glacier National Park. And also, I think it's the third largest wilderness in North America, or at least in the United States. And I think one of the highest densities of grizzly bears,
Yeah.
and a heavy concentration of wolves, which we heard and we saw tracks, and we saw tracks of grizzlies. But when we got up there, I'm not seeing any sign, and I'm thinking, boy, these boys are going to take us on a snipe hunt where we're, get your pillowcases and your flashlights and go out after dark. Because I didn't know whether or not we're going to have any luck, and I felt a lot of pressure on me because, you wanted to go on this hunt, and it's not something you're going to be able to do real often. This was kind of like your big shot to be able to go get a bull. And I was like, man, if this comes up a loss because I didn't pick the right one, I was going to feel like a real turd. But we get up on top of the ridge and we look around, we're not seeing anything. And Strite and Coulter were kind of surprised. They're kind of like, oh, this place is generally pretty good. And we proceeded to kind of go along that ridge. And Joel, what did we find when we got kind of a little bit further over that ridge and we topped over that brush and we kind of had a surprise over there?
Well, we came around the sort of top of the mountaintop, and then we sort of like meander around down into the tree line, and we come upon a hunter's camp. And there's five dudes standing there, all looking at us, confused about who we are and why we're there. We're confused about who they are and why they're there.
They're
And
just getting
nobody,
up. They're just
yeah,
getting
they're
up on
just waking
opening
up.
morning, and it's like 9 o'clock.
Yeah, 9:30. They haven't done anything but wake up and put some clothes on, not in a rush at all, and everyone is very quiet. Like I thought, well, maybe we'll go talk to them or
Yeah, that's what I
you know
thought. Maybe they're friends.
something. Yeah, maybe they know each other. Nope, we just
Oh,
kept on going quietly
oh, they
and
know each other.
stopped in the trees and we hear some some sort of like rumbling and rustling around and all of a sudden they come bolting past us on their horses down past us on the way to where we were headed. So
And and the lead guy, kind of with, I think he's got red hair, on his horse, giving us just a stink eye f you look when he just kind of came by, just like, what the hell are you doing here type look. And I still didn't understand what was happening. In fact, it was a little bit later before Strat started explaining to us what happened. You want to take a
yeah,
crack at that?
yeah, I mean we so those guys burned past us on their horses and striked the outfitters. We sort of like are looking at each other like, well, what are we doing? What's going on? Who are those people? What's happening? And he says, well, we'll go down there and go around and past their camp and water the horses and come up with a plan B because they burned off into the direction we were going to go to
Right,
sort
right.
of dig down to the bottom of the drainage. And then he lets out that hey, that turns out was the old outfitter who used to own the company, and we're like, oh, okay, well things are coming together now.
Yeah.
Um, his personality in mean mugging us as he passed us by to cut us off from going down this ridge down to find some elk is the same personality he had while we were trying to correspond with him about what the hunt might look like
Mm-hmm.
the year before. So it's
And
fun.
come to find out, actually, that he, I guess, had been in Alaska. I don't know if it was earlier that year or maybe it was the previous year, and was actually be pursued or is had a court date for many charges against him. And I haven't like looked up the result of that, but he was charged with like poaching a grizzly bear, hunting the same day that he flew, which is illegal in Alaska if you don't know, and several other charges, which is just hearsay at
Hunting
this point.
outside the unit, he had a tag for
Right, right. He's going to have his
um,
day in court. We're not saying he's guilty, but doesn't look
allegedly.
doesn't look good that your outfitter was doing that, and he knows damn well where the new outfitter is going to go, and he went up there kind of cock block us, I
Yep.
think, and
Yep.
to kind of claim that spot. So, but I got to give it to Strite. He was a gentleman. He didn't get upset about it. He kind of let them have their way and tried to stay back and not be confrontational. So kudos to Strite, and Caitlin. I know as well as every interaction, they are just you know model citizens. I would think from that perspective. So yeah, we had to go to a plan B. We ended up, instead of going down that ridge, we kind of went almost straight down kind of this face of this basin. We had to walk our horses down because there's a lot of rock and shale. Got down there and kind of meandered around the rest of the afternoon. Had lunch, and all fast forward, we kind of went in the same basin. It's a big area, even though they're there. We're not going to run into each other. And we ended up, it started to get about evening, probably around, I don't know, what do you think, 3:30, 4:30, it's starting
Something
to get
about
later in the evening. And we found some springs and some tracks around. And so Stripe was like, well, I think we'll set up here and do a kind of a blind calling set. And so we put Joel kind of at this wallow, and this is kind of a funny part. So when we left Joel, Stripe said, Chris, you're going to sit with us. But then on the way up to where Stripe was going to sit, Stripe changed his mind and he said, no, 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 I'm going to have you sit here instead. So about halfway between where Stripe was calling and where Joel was sitting, he put me in another spot. And so they go back, sit back there, and they proceed to call. And I don't remember if they did bugling or not, but they were cow calling. I think they raked a little bit. And to hear Stripe and Coulter tell it, they're sitting in kind of this brushy set of trees, and I think Coulter, Strike goes, Coulter, is that an elk over there? And sure enough, while they were calling, a really nice 6 point and a smaller 5 point had come in. And I would say they probably come in from, I think, the north because the sun was setting to our left. You were further west. I was a little bit further east of you. They were further east of me, and they came in from the north. I didn't know it. You didn't know it. So Stripe skimmies down, down by me, and he's like, Chris, two balls, 60 yards north. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, go get them. So I get up and try to get over there, and I'm not exactly sure where they're at. Meanwhile, Joel has no clue because I
Nope.
don't think Stripe was able to get down to you. I'm like trying to sneak in their direction, but not. I'm trying to be aware of my surroundings. I get about halfway there, and I see them, and they've got there's two trees, they're kind of sets of trees, and they're in between it, and they got me pegged. They're looking at me, and I'm froze, and I'm just like, be the bush, be the bush, don't move, wait, wait, and then Stripe continued to call on Riddick, and that kind of distracted him. I tried to move up, and they kind of, and I'm going to get this probably part wrong, so jump in here, and they kind of ran down a little bit, and I tried to reposition on them, and I kind of just thought, well, they figured out what the deal is. They hadn't smelled us, but I thought they saw me, and so they ran down. Stripe goes down to try to do some more calling. I'm kind of stay up high where I can on this ridge where I think I can see them, and they kind of go a little bit further north. And then I look through the trees and I see this bow hunter kind of cruising through the trees calling. And I thought, son of a bitch, it's those guys from our old outfitter and they've swooped in here. And then I look a little harder and I'm like, no, that's Joel. Joel's down in there. He's putting the move on them. And this is where, Joel, I got to give you credit. You are aggressive when it comes to elk on foot. And this is something I have not mastered yet. I've seen you do it in other places we've hunted before when we do cow hunts, is if you got the wind, you're pushing hard. So
Yep.
tell us what you saw.
So I mean, Stripe dropped me at basically at an ambush spot.
Mm-hmm.
So we found a bunch of sign, fresh tracks, some scat. And so we're like, well, I'm going to sit here with like maybe a 30, 35-yard shot on this sort of very heavily tracked little wallow spring area, which is not my forte. Sitting still and waiting to ambush them is not what I want to do. I want to be like moving and getting after
Right.
them. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got my feet dug in. Everything is right. I got my, make sure I don't have anything blocking my way of getting into full draw. Arrows knocked. I'm ready to roll. And then I hear, so I hear sort of back above me, I hear him doing some calling here and there, and then I like hear some raking, and then I hear some antlers clacking together, and I'm like, man, he's really going after it, trying to get something to come around here. And I mean, it was probably 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes that I sat there and listened to all this go on, just thinking, well, I whatever. And then while you were sneaking up on them, he had made his way all the way back to me and
Okay.
told me, "Get up, let's go. We saw these elk." So I come with him and I move around under them, sort of like down the slope from them, and make my way up toward where you guys had been.
Yep.
But I don't know where they're at because they're not
Right.
talking.
No.
And so he's still calling, and so I'm just like listening and trying to figure out where you might be because he said that you had moved up on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of making my way across the slope, and then I hear the clacking of the antlers, and then I thought, okay, so I shift and start moving up the slope toward them, and then I start cow calling, and I probably when I first saw them, I was probably 50 yards from them, and they're locked up just clacking antlers together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start moving in quietly, and I probably ranged them at 30 yards, 35 yards. I saw the 5 point. He was a little smaller bodied. Then I saw like big bodied
He's a
six
nice
point with
bull.
like
Yeah.
thin, super wide
Very
rack
wide.
and pretty long points, but thin. They
Hmm.
weren't super thick.
Hmm.
But it was like my goal was to go out there, and if I had an opportunity, what my goal was to shoot a 6 point. I didn't care if it was, you know, 400 inches or 280. My goal was a 6 point bull. Um,
Yep.
and so I'm like, if I can get in and get a good shot opportunity on that bull, I'm shooting it. Day one, 30 minutes into having found elk, uh, I'm gonna punch a tag if I get an opportunity here. So
Yep. Yep.
I start moving after them like aggressively, and I kept they sort of would bump a little farther, and I would make my way through the trees and I'm cow calling all the way, just trying to keep them sort of stopped. And at one point, that big 6 point bull just stops in this doorway, this perfect doorway at like 56 yards. And so, which is too long. It was too long for what I wanted to do.
He's just standing
My
there saying,
goal,
"Come at me,
he was
bro."
yeah, yeah. He stopped there. He's looking back, all sexy like,
Hmm.
just 100% broadside,
Yep.
perfect shot opportunity. He just was a little farther than I wanted
It's
to
a long
shoot because of
ways.
my goal is I don't want to take a first shot more than 41, 42 yards because that's my bottom pin. And I have a
Yeah.
slider, but I don't want to have to adjust the slider
No.
on my
No.
first shot. If I'm having to
Yep.
make some sort of follow up shot, then
Yeah.
whatever it is up yet.
Would you have had clearance, you think, with branches?
That was my main concern. I was
Yeah.
very tempted to go ahead and take that 56-yard shot, but it
Right.
was like the ceiling of the branches,
Pretty
just
low.
I wasn't sure that it was gonna clear it, and so I thought I'm just gonna try to get closer because
Yep.
he's gonna stop it. He's gonna keep stopping and looking. At some point, I can get, as long as I keep the wind, I can get to him and get close enough that I'll get a good shot opportunity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I
And
just
it's
keep pushing and pushing. And I got within 20 yards of them out of 4 or 5 times,
right.
with without getting winded, and without them getting too worked up. They just were already, by the time that I started chasing them, they were already sort of a little like alert, high alert.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they've got this like cow elk just like screaming running after them. So they're very confused about what's going on. And the last time I saw them is when they actually did finally wind me.
Yeah.
I felt the wind hit the back of my neck, and I knew it was
It's
dead. But
over.
I was at 20 yards on that 5 point, and he was just looking dead at me.
Yep.
And then the wind hit them, and they bounced out of there quick.
But
So
that was a great first encounter because
absolutely,
I kind of alluded to it in the morning. I thought they may be full of shit. I don't know if there's any elk in these valleys or not. They may just taking us on a tour. And by God, those unicorns do exist out there, So
yep,
we saw them, and they weren't like that. That 6 point, he was wide. I mean, I saw him good, like front on. His ears were out, and his antlers were coming out, and
yeah.
he
He
was.
had to be 4 feet wide
I think so.
at the
He was a
widest point.
beauty. I saw the 5 point. It was kind of normal 5 point, but I was pumped. We were all extremely excited that evening. We headed back in. I don't think we got back in until it may have been midnight. Was it that the night we got in
Yeah, it was
midnight,
like
or was it?
11:30, I think. We
Yeah,
got back probably at 11:30. They had dinner ready,
yeah.
and then it was like, okay, here we go. We're gonna get up at 3 o'clock in the morning again. So go get your three
Yeah,
hour nap, and then we're
we
gonna
took
hit the road.
we took a nap because we were like, oh, we know where they're at, and we want to get them on in the morning, and that didn't turn out. We went
No,
out in the morning and we looked around and we didn't find squat in the
yeah,
morning.
we probably did. We went back, tied the horses up in basically the same place that we had the afternoon before,
Yep.
and then just sort of started working our way up and we probably did two or three, four calling sets,
Yep.
Just, you and I would spread out 30, 40 yards apart, and then Coulter and Stripe would sit back 30 or 40 yards from us and just do some calling and
Yep.
see if anything would come in. And I mean, we probably did 15 to 20 minutes each time and just dead nothing,
Yep.
nothing.
And we should say, when those bulls came in on day one, they did not answer. They came in
Not
quiet.
not one time.
So it's kind of, you got to be prepared that you may not get the traditional kind of born and raised YouTube experience where they bugle and they come right in, right? So, and I've had that as well on other hunts. So that second day, it was all the way again, kind of a repeat of day one. Not until the evening we started to see them. Then we started to hear some bugles actually, and we had a couple bugling from different locations, and this is when I'm figuring out my ears aren't as good because you know I'd see Strike kind of have this strange look and go, "There's a bull." I'd be like, "I don't know what you're talking about," and I think you heard about half of them, and it wasn't until they started getting louder that I would hear them. And I think there were two different directions. I think there were some bulls bugling. We decided to go after one. It was kind of down towards the bottom of that basin, I think.
Yeah, we worked up. I mean, it probably, after all those calling sets, and then just sort of like we took a little nap in the timber, and
Yep.
then made our way basically all the way back up to where we had seen those bulls the day before.
Yep.
Um, did a calling set there. Didn't really hear anything, and then we made our way across that scree field. That's the first
The
time,
ankle
if I'm
breaker.
remembering correctly, that's the first time we walked up on that wallow and saw those like grizzly bear paws the size
Yeah.
of a dinner plate, and
Yep.
and wolf tracks in the same place.
Right.
And then made our way across the scree field. Then our calling set on the other side of that, and
Yep.
then we're sitting up on this ridge top looking down into the basin, and
Mm-hmm.
we hear this Tyrannosaurus Rex bull, sound off way
Mm-hmm.
down at the bottom, and it was like, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Here we go.
I think it was that same meeting. There was a smaller bull closer, and that's what we were trying to get to come. I may have my days backwards, but we were trying to get one to come. This is when you and I were top of that ridge, and we're kind of like, should we go down? Should we not? Because Stripe was calling, getting a reception, and the right thing to do is he backs off and keeps calling like the bull's moving away to pull the bull in. And so I think he was trying to call a smaller bull close to us. But like you said, that Tyrannosaurus Rex sounding one is at the bottom of the canyon. And I don't know if you ever saw him, but I could get my binoculars on him. I could see him. He was at the bottom of that canyon. I could see through a hole in the trees. He was down there raking a big tree, like a big cedar or juniper, and he had several cows around him. I never could make out exactly his points, but obviously he was a big monarch. He would have been beautiful. But we were kind of focused on that one close by. I think we should have took a page out of your book, like from the day before, and been aggressive and ran up. And we kind of stood there and nothing really materialized. We did move up, and then we did see this smaller bull kind of through the brush. I tried to make a play on him coming around, and while we're doing that, Strat was trying to get through a creek and he fell. and and there was kind of like the old Saint Nick. Came a clatter, but we weren't going to get up on that bull either. We got all the way to the bottom of that canyon or that basin in there, and it's getting dark. And Stripe is kind of like a dog with a bone. He wanted to call that bull so bad. He kept calling, and the bull kept answering. He kept getting closer. And Joel and I both were trying to reason with him and tell him, we really don't want you to call him in the dark and him figure out that we're not an elk. He's like, oh, we still got like 5 minutes of light. We could do it. And I'm telling him, I can't see my pins through my peep sight. And he's just convinced that
Much
one of
less
us.
anything past them.
No, not at all. And we're trying to make our ways down to the horses. It's getting just pitch friggin' black. The bull is essentially chasing us
Yep.
out of that place. I fall and bust my knee, just like bruise it really bad on my left knee. We get almost to the horses, and then I remember Stripe was like, get my headlamp. And he's trying to get Coulter to get his headlamp. And I think he thought something was getting his horses because there was something going on. The horses were upset. Turns out there was a herd of cow elk over there. I don't know how. Did you ever see them?
I
I
never
could,
saw them.
I could
I
hear
heard
them.
them. I heard them run through, but I never saw any of them.
So I'm sure it was probably 3, but it sounded like it was 15 to 20 of them ran right by our horses. Horses are tied up, or so we thought. One of them, I guess it's Strite's horse, which
Yeah,
was loose,
Stride's horse was just walking around.
but he's just having a good time. He wasn't going to leave his buddies. So we get back on our horses to go back to camp. And we have a plan. So we're tired sons of guns because we hadn't got more than probably 6 hours sleep in the last 2 days. So they're like, we're going to spike camp up in this area because we're finding elk in here. Because the rest of the area is not like necessarily like this everywhere. We've kind of found a hot spot. So we're going to spike camp next night. But to do a spike camp, we need to kind of gather up our gear, get a mule or two, bring everything in. So we got to sleep in, got to have civilized breakfast. Base camp is really nice when we're there.
Hmm.
And so we packed up. I guess this is on day 3. I don't know, we left like what, midday, went
Yeah,
back, I
probably
guess,
noon,
yeah,
one
something like
o'clock
that,
maybe.
in time for another evening hunt, and set up a spike camp, which is essentially us sleeping in like I think Joel, you brought your 1-man tent. I brought a bivy sack. We've got a tarp just kind of between the trees over in this area where we're going to have our dinner. And it was kind of a repeat of the same day. We could hear, we kind of made our play up into this basin. We could hear this elk kind of deep off in this hollow. And I don't know why we didn't go after that bull more aggressively. I think he thought there was one closer on our side of the basin. We kind of chased it all the way to the edge, and there was really nothing there. Came back, and again, we get kind of chased back, in the dark by that bull again. So,
Yep.
really uneventful day 3. So, day 4, and before I start with day 4 story, and I'm going to let you tell most of this, there's 2 of us, and we're hunting together. We had to figure out who's going to go first, and we're both being too gentlemanly, like, no, no, you should go. No, no, you should go. And so Stripe flips a coin, and you won the coin toss, which I'm really glad you did. And so you're kind of our primary, and I'm a secondary. But we have a gentleman's agreement as well between us of, but if you get an opportunity,
Shoot
take
it.
that opportunity.
Yep.
So day 4, we wake up in the spike camp, and we are not far from where we want to be, which was really nice. Not have to get on those damn horses again. And we hiked up kind of into the area. I don't know. It was not quite as early. It's probably 6:30 or something like that. And then
Yeah,
we
we
had
got a
a
late start because Strite and Coulter were not feeling great.
oh, that's right. I
He
forgot. I
was
forgot.
he was having stomach issues, and so
Yeah.
I figured the alarm kept going off, and I figured, well, I'll just we'll have a leisurely start this morning. I don't mind that at
Yeah.
all.
It's something they ate. I don't know. Which, if anybody's hunted with me, they know I'm the eternal Boy Scout, and I carry something for everything. And so I had Pepto Bismol for both those young gentlemen, and was able. And they were hurting because at first I offered it to them, and they're like, "Nah, I'm good." And then about another 50 yards, he goes, "I'm going to take you up on that Pepto Bismol." So we get up a little bit further, and I don't remember the order here, but we're calling, and a cow elk busts in on us like at 30 yards, scared the bejesus out of all of us. I think we're kind of like, all of a sudden, all of us are like, get down. And it came in, and I was the only one I think had a good view clearly of it. And
Yeah, I
Strite's
never
like,
saw it.
and Strite was like, how big was it? And I was like, big. It was a cow. He goes, oh, I thought it was a young bull. The way that it came in. I was like, no. And that's when he was having stomach issues, and he's like, I'm gonna have to see a man about a horse, if you know what I mean. And so we kind of went on without him, and I don't remember exactly how it happened, but we thought, he's over there taking care of business in the woods as a man does. And all of a sudden, were we calling or did he call? I think, but we
No,
just imagined, or you were calling.
we sort of got into the target area of where we told him we were going to go, and then I
Yep.
just ripped off a couple of cow calls,
Yep.
and I mean it was like almost instant that this bull just screams off in the
Yeah.
distance,
He's just like,
and we're
just
like,
perfect.
yes. So then we start hearing. So I kept like intermittent cow calling,
Mhm.
and he keeps answering, and then we hear Stripe probably 300 or 400 yards away, and we start hearing him cow calling,
Yep.
and the bull's responding to him, and so we finally meet up and we start moving sort of slowly in that direction.
Yep.
And I mean, we set up. I think we set up two or three times and just called
Yeah.
and just to see if he would come in, and he never really felt like he was getting any closer. And we finally hit that last, that last little sort of ditch in with
Yeah.
this hump in between the ridge
And
and a
there's the
creek
creek,
bottom.
a ridge, and then where we were, and then it's like a steep mountain face up.
Yeah.
With it's very wooded though.
At that point, he was pretty close. I mean, it felt like he was probably 200 yards away, and he's
I think so.
screaming back at us pretty
Yep.
regularly.
Yep.
And I mean, at that point, we both set up probably, I don't know, probably 40 yards apart.
Yeah, something like that. We put you kind
Um,
of like straight line of sight where we thought he was coming. Went, like you say, about 40 yards, and the wind was blowing from our left to right. And
yeah,
sometimes they'll circle. So I went downwind in case he circled about 40 yards, and we can see each other.
yeah. So Strike he was probably 20 yards behind us at that point, and he continues cow calling and just sort of moving back, just like gradually moving back farther and farther away from us. And then we hear the bull screaming, and we hear him coming down, and then I see him. I probably saw him at 75, 80 yards, maybe, like
Did too.
across the ditch, across the creek bottom,
Yep.
on the side of the ridge,
Yep.
just standing out there raking up the trees. And I don't think he screamed again. Strike keeps calling, and then he dropped out of sight from where I could see, and then it just went silent.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where
And
I
it
was
was
like,
probably
where did
it
he
was
go?
probably quiet for like 60 seconds, it feels like.
Oh, at
Um,
least. At least.
Maybe it was longer than that. It felt like a long time. And then I hear this crash, and oh, he's going to come up out of that creek bottom, run into these trees in front of me. And so at that point, I have ranged every tree, every log. I know every distance that he could pop. If he pops out on the side that I'm on, I know every yardage of every spot that
Yeah.
he
You
could
and me
that
both.
he
I
could
had a ball
possibly stop at.
in
And
front of
so
me.
I'm
I had
like,
everything. Yep.
where I hear that crashing down in the creek bottom, he's either going to come up and turn to his right and come at me, or he's going to keep going down and come over that hump, and he's going to be directly in front of you, and one of us is getting a shot on this bull.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and he just happened to pop out and turn right, and he popped out at 25 yards, and he just stood there staring around, like looking around. And as soon as I saw him as soon as I saw his nose breaking through the brush, I already had an arrow knocked, but as soon as
Yep.
I saw his nose breaking the brush, I'm at full draw, just
Yep.
waiting.
Yep.
And I know, I know he's at 25. If he takes two steps, he's at 20. I know this log right in front of him is 18. And so I just waited, and he came out into the open, and it's just like facing me directly, which is not what I wanted. You know, I have not taken a frontal shot before, from 18 yards, 20 yards. I was comfortable. I was going to be comfortable doing it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's not what I wanted, because the target zone is not as big as if
Smaller,
he's
but
turned
it's,
broadside, and it's like a dinner plate size
yeah.
target, which is what I've had the first three times. Just straight broadside shots.
Yep.
So I decide he's at 20 yards. This is uh I'm going to take this shot, and I
Yep.
centered that 20-yard pin right in that vital zone in between right at the bottom of his neck. And I'd let an arrow fly, and I'd waited. I mean, I probably waited just 1 second too long.
Mm-hmm.
And he took one step, and his head dipped down. And the next thing I see after I let that arrow go is 20 inches of arrow stuck out of his head. And I thought, oh shit. So I looked down. I'm like, I got to get another shot in. So I look
Yep.
down, and I pull an arrow out to knock another arrow and get a follow up shot. And by the time I get back up, he's gone.
Yep.
And I hear him crash through. And so then I look at you,
Yep.
and I start moving toward you, and you're ranging and whatever. And I come,
Yep.
and I'm just like, just despair is washing over me. Um, Shame and guilt and all the
So
all the terrible emotions.
So when he came across, I kind of lost him, because I saw him come down, I couldn't see him raking when you said that. And I can see you, and there's trees between me and him. And then I see you draw, and I'm like, okay, this is happening. You shoot, I still can't see him, but I see kind of motion. He whirls and turns and runs back. He goes just back the way he came. I can see him go up the mountain, and he kind of zigzags over in front of me. And that's when I was ranging, because I'm calling, because kind of what my experience is when a bull gets hit, they don't really understand what it is. And if you can get a call off, they'll think, oh, that was an elk and I got spooked by an elk, but it's okay. And he got up there and he kind of stopped. And as he's going up, I could see about like a significant amount of arrows sticking out kind of his upper neck. And I'm like, oh, that's not the place it's supposed to be. And he was going up there and he stopped and I ranged and I was like, I might could shoot from here if you've already got an arrow on him. And as I was kind of contemplating that and trying to get a range, he then just kept walking and there was no opportunity. He was gone. And then, I kind of, I think Strike thought I was doing it on purpose, but I called 3 cow calls at a time, like on top of each other, which is obvious. Nobody does that, to let him know you need to come up here. So he came up and we kind of like shared our game plan of, okay, what did we all see and in what's the circumstance there. And so I guess we waited it was 2 hours, right, for the initial wait.
Well, we said 2, but I think we ended up waiting 3.
We did, because we got up further and we ended up waiting another hour. So during that 2 hours, we it's hard, man, waiting, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to go, let's go find him, right? But you need to give him enough time, and you vary the time depending upon the shot. And in this one, we weren't exactly sure about the shot, that's why we gave him 2 hours, which was the right call. It was the morning. I don't know when it was that the shot happened. Maybe 8 o'clock, something like that,
Yeah. Around
give
there,
or take.
8:30 maybe.
Yeah. I went over to my spot and marked it with flagging tape where I had been, and then kind of looked to see where I thought I'd seen him last, because it was significantly way up the mountain, and that would help us get on the blood trail. After we waited 2 hours, you, Strike, and Coulter went across and kind of went up, and you guys were finding pretty good blood, so you actually didn't need me to kind of get you on the path, right?
Yeah, it's where I hit him, there wasn't much going on. So we just sort of like fanned out, the 3 of us fanned out in a, sort of a triangle pattern looking for any blood at all. And so we find a drip, and then we find a drip, and then we find a drip, and we start sort of moving. We move down into the creek bottom, and we're finding drips, like couple of drips, and we just sort of like meandered. And it was probably, I mean, maybe 3 or 4 feet between each like drip,
Right.
and then it's a little some like a splotch,
Yep.
and then a splotch here and a splotch there, and then it gets to be like a spurt.
Yep.
And we probably, I mean, we meandered, the 3 of us meandered all the way up to where you had seen him last. And at
Yep.
that point, I mean, it was probably little splotches here and there, but pretty regular. I mean, 4 or 5 feet apart, enough that it was like we have a trail.
Yep.
So it's like, Chris, get up here, and we'll just, one person will stay at the last blood, and we'll just sort of work our way up the trail.
And this is where, like, I think having a team of guys, at least 2, because you and I have tracked before successfully, kind of helping each other. In this case, we had 4 of us, and there would be spots where we'd lose the trail, right? And so, like, one of us, generally me, would stand by, okay, this is the last spot. And we'd all kind of, the rest of us would go out different directions. And some people like, I got it, here it is, and continue it on. I think we did that probably 5 or 6 times where we
At
lost the
least.
trail, at least. And, and this was like going almost straight up that mountain until we hit that bench. Then we got to the bench. Then the blood started getting a lot better. It really
And
started hitting.
there was one place, I don't remember if it was on that first section of the straight up ridge, or it was after we had sort of meandered past all the rock stuff into
Mm-hmm.
the timber again. But
Mm-hmm.
there was a point at which that bull bleeding like pretty bad jumped, I mean, 10 yards or something. Like
Yes.
he jumped over three downed trees in like a single jump with no blood anywhere. And
Yep.
it was like it's pretty amazing animal.
Somewhere in there, I think it might have been when we got to the bench, we stopped and we gave it another hour at that
Yeah,
point. And it may have been because we thought the blood looked fresher and we wanted to make sure that we weren't pushing him.
yeah. So by the time we got to that bench, it's like big big gushes coming out pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still like very like wet and red. And it was like let's give him a little while to like do whatever he's going to do so that we don't bump him out of this basin altogether.
Yep.
Because we're still like I still don't know for sure where the arrow hit.
Right.
All I know is that it was somewhere in like the upper neck, like face area, which I'm like, I mean,
We're,
I
we're,
was,
we're a testament to these, like, Crime Stopper witnesses, about when something happens really fast and then, okay, what did you see? It's really hard to know when the adrenaline is flowing and then you're like, okay, recall the details. Tell me exactly what happened. Where did it
yeah,
happen? Which side? And you're like, I think I know what happened, but you're not sure. But we waited 3 hours now. We're getting further along. We're starting to see better blood. And I think all of us are starting to get a lot more optimistic at this point
yep,
because the blood volume is pretty heavy. But this is an incredible distance that we've already gone. So we're worried on one hand that we might bump him, and that wouldn't be good. We're also in grizzly bear country. And I've heard stories, as you have as well, of elk going down, a grizzly bear getting to them before you do, and then you happen upon your dead elk and the grizzly bear who's defending that as his next meal.
yeah.
So we've got Stripe with a lever action 30-06 there, but we have you up front in case we need to take another shot. So take us to the end of the trail. What did we see there?
So I mean, probably 700 yards.
I think
You know,
it's
sort of.
I think it's
I don't know
six
what it
now.
was as the crow flies, but it was 600 or 700 yards that we followed this blood trail. Up the ridge, onto a bench, and down this pretty heavy game trail, and all the way. I mean, the farther we get, the more blood is coming out, just like
Yep.
piles of blood pouring out of this elk, and it's just like what? So the optimism is increasing about the fact that this has been, that this has turned out to be a good shot, or an effective shot, I should say, not a good one. Um, and we just meander through these trails, and we come up onto this opening, and there's just like a massive bed of blood. And then I look down, and probably 15 yards from us, there he is. This, giant 6 point giant. He was a great
Beautiful.
6 point bull. Beautiful
He's
bull.
beautiful. Most
Um,
symmetrical bull I've ever seen. He's just like
yeah,
perfectly matched. Perfectly
yeah.
matched. And
So
we're
lots
all
of
just
emotions
like,
in that
oh
moment.
my God.
High
Yes.
fiving. I'm crying. Just relief. Uh, all the bad feelings and the regret and whatever come out, and just high fives and hugs all around, and just I mean, incredible, incredible feeling to have finally punched that bull tag after 6 years.
And I congratulated you and then cursed you for shooting him in such a shitty spot because it was
Yeah,
freaking awful spot. My God, he had to crawl like he couldn't have been down in the creek bottom where the horses were. He had to go
no,
halfway up the damn mountain,
no.
600 yards up there. And you and I were like looking at him going, "Damn, he's in the bad spot," because he was like in the bushes and there's blowdown, these big logs, and he'd fallen over the log, over on his back, feet kicked up in the air. He's laying back
In between two
in
blowdown
between.
logs. So
Yeah,
he's like, how are we
this
going to turn this thing over to even start cutting?
he's a big booger. He's probably, I don't know, how big do you think? He's 600 pounds?
600 pounds.
Yeah. So Joel and I are putting our equipment down. We're getting ready for what looks like to be a big task. We turn around. Strite and Coulter have already wheeled him over the log and got him onto a flat spot. And they got out their knives and they were already skinning. And we made quick work of him. We did gutless method. They were cutting off quarters. Joel and I would take the quarters, we hung them in a tree with some paracord and went to skin those quarters. They left the skin on. We'd skin them off and then we'd get them into the game bags. I think we made pretty good work of him. It's a big job. It takes several hours. And I'm kind of like this on whitetail. I love to shoot an animal in the morning when you've got all day to take care of it. You got
Hmm.
daylight. You got plenty of light to go blood track them and go put everything up because I hate doing that in the dark. And so we had the whole day. But again, we're in bear country, and so every time we would get a quarter done, we would cut the the what do you call that, the lower shank of the hoof and the hide and off, and I'd take it and I'd throw it in the brush kind of as far away from us as possible. Well, I didn't think about it, but Strike and Coulter are over there cutting on this elk. Every time they hear something in the bushes, they're like, "What was that? Get your guns! It's a bear!" So we had a couple of false bear worries there. And then I think you were hallucinating at one point and thought you saw something moving. I think it was a raven or something. But
Yeah,
we got everything.
every odd noise and blowing branch in the breeze was like, what is that?
What is that?
What is
Can
that?
you imagine? Can you imagine that at night? Oh my
No,
God!
no.
So I'm very very thankful. But absolutely magnificent bull. We should say your shot turned out to be a lethal shot. Kudos to Iron Will broadheads. That is a very
Absolutely.
tough, very sharp broadhead. It did lodge in the neck just below the head, and you had hit an artery, and he bled out. And I think kudos to Strike and Coulter for keeping us on the trail. Teamwork of the group, keeping us. I mean, that's the longest blood trail I have ever gone on in
Yep.
the over 30 years bow hunting that I've done. A lot of animals on the ground. I've never seen a successful. It it is longer than your cow elk last year that we had to track. Like I think that was a
Yeah.
300-yard track.
That was like 300 as the crow flies.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I think you're due for one to fall over dead after you shoot him now next time. And it wasn't enough experience for Strike, to get these, Texans over here and shoot a Montana 6 point. He was like, "We're going to take a break and we're going to carve off a little meat and start a fire right here
yeah.
and have a little caveman on a stick lunch."
Yeah. That was a good break from the work to sit and eat the freshest elk meat that you've ever had.
It was a good experience. It was a very good experience. I was reminiscent of. I remember what's flashing through my head is watching Stephen Ranella in Alaska eating black
Hmm.
bear in a similar situation with trichinosis and that black bear. This is elk. We're all fine, but still, it was very similar to that, except it wasn't rainy. It was very very nice day. So we get elk put into quarters, into the bags. We got all the meat packed up. Massive head. Whatever reason, Strite and Coulter cut all the quarters off, and I think they needed a break. And they're like, "You guys cut the head off." And so, we went and tried to work that. That was not easy, but we got that removed because you want to do a Euro mount, which is a beautiful Euro mount, by the way. And we get ready to go down the hill, and we're going to have to pack it out. And Joel, what kind of equipment do you have with you?
In my defense, I asked him 3 times in the same conversation. I said, "Are you sure that I don't need to bring my frame pack? Are you sure? There's no reason for me to bring my frame pack." No, no, no,
Before
no.
we
Just
before we ever
before we
left
came on the
Texas.
trip. Before we
Yep.
came on the trip, I'm talking to him about logistics and gear. I'm trying to dial in what to leave, because we're used to like going out, having a base camp,
Yep.
uh, and bringing whatever we
Yep.
need.
Yep.
And we're
And
figuring that we're not going to need as much stuff as we normally bring. So
right.
I'm just trying to lighten the load. And I'm like,
Yep.
okay, tell me about the pack. Do I need to bring my frame pack? I'm ready to do that. Or I can, I got a day pack, whatever the case may be. It's like, we're
Yep.
going to be riding around on horses. If we shoot an elk, we're going to put it on the back of the horse. Don't bring your frame pack. Your
Yep.
day pack will be fine. And I'm
Yep.
like, Are you sure?
And you're not afraid to pack. I don't mean that,
No,
because we
no,
hauled, you and I on our backs hauled 2 elk out of our undisclosed location for 2023,
that's right.
and that was not a huge distance, but I think it was like a mile and a half through some canyons we had to get out,
Yeah.
and 2 trips each. Well, 2 trips on yours, 1 trip on mine. But yeah, so you had a day pack.
So I had a day pack with no frame, and
I
I'm
I had a
just
frame
like,
pack because I'm stubborn like that, and I was like, I don't care what he said, I'm bringing it. And I
well,
think one
hindsight
of
is
them,
2020.
and one of them had a frame pack, and the other one, I don't know what you'd call that. Coulter had, it was some sort of backpack.
Basically, just a hiking pack is all he had,
Yeah.
like
So
frameless, just floppy hiking pack.
we've got the biggest damn bodied bull I've ever seen in my experience. He's a lot bigger than the 5 point I killed, and luckily Strat and Coulter are very young men and very very stout. So we got everything out, and I took what I thought was a front quarter. Later, come to find out that actually was a hind quarter. I think
And a
is
backstrap.
and a backstrap. I did not realize. I wondered why it's so heavy. So I had a hind quarter and a backstrap, and I bet that was 100 pounds,
Easy,
probably.
easy.
I was like, why is this so heavy? But it was. So I put that on, and then Coulter, who's like 21, took 2 quarters, and then Strite took a quarter and the head, and then you had all the miscellaneous meat.
I had
And
the meat sack and the like, you know, choice meat. I had the
yes,
random meat sack on attached to my pack, and I was
yep,
carrying the tenderloins and whatever. I don't know.
yep, yep.
And no
So
matter how many times I asked, he would not give me that head.
yeah, yeah, I know. He probably didn't want to have to unload it. So we're standing there. I'm the first to load my pack. That was a mistake because I ended up with that heavy ass load of a hind quarter and the back strap. And as I'm standing there, I'm like, if I don't start moving, I'm gonna just fall down. And so they're still futzing around trying to get everything. And I'm just like, boys, I know the trail. I'm gonna go ahead and start. And I guarantee you're gonna catch me because I'm the old man of the group, and everybody's faster than me. And the whole damn week, everybody's been waiting on me. Like as we go somewhere, they're like, well, wait on Chris and let him rest up. So I'll go ahead and take off. And then Joel catches up with me, and we're trying to. We didn't really mark our trail with like Onyx or anything. We should have, but we were trying to follow the blood trail out, especially essentially. It's not too bad on the bench, but man, when we had to start descending, I've got my trekking poles, I've got all this weight, and I've got weight in my pack and my bow. So I think I had about 130 pounds probably on my back.
You had a lot.
It was a lot for these skinny old legs. And so I am like planting my poles, and I fell once, like straight back, not straight back, kind of my feet slipped out from under me, but nothing got hurt. It was fine. And finally got to the bottom of the creek. We waited a while for the guys to catch up, and they were taking breaks too. We got down to the creek, and they needed a rest there. And again, I was like, if I don't keep moving, I'm not going to be able to move again. So I kept going, and I was going solo out. And then I think you decided you're going to try to catch up with me.
Yeah.
And somehow, even though I thought I was following the right path, you got on a different trail and made it back to the spike camp before me. I don't know how
Yeah.
you did that. And I've
Yeah, I
never
was
been so
very
happy.
confused because I was probably 15 minutes behind you.
I was going very slow.
And I just worked my way. I didn't know exactly where the trail was that was like the main one that would take us
Yeah.
back to the spike camp, but I just
I
sort of
was
like
on that
went
trail.
in the general direction, and I must have
Yep.
just like cut through the timber in front of you and just
I think that you
burned
did.
off.
I think you did. So I get back. The guys finally get back. We walked it all the way to the spike camp, which I measured it. I want to say it was like 1.6 miles or something like
Yeah,
that. It
it
was
was
a
a little over a mile and a half.
long ways to carry all that. And we found actually this area had another camp in it, and they had got a meat pole set up in the trees. And so we rigged your meat up and hung it up that night. And we just camped out at the spike camp that night. And then the next morning, loaded up the mules. As we were loading up the mules, we heard wolves. And Stripe played a pretty practical joke to me. He was out there howling at him, going, "Woo!" And they'd answer back. And then he started doing a coyote kind of like, and then I don't know if he mentioned it. I think wolves hate coyotes. He's trying to call the wolf in,
Yeah.
and he's like 200 yards out. We're getting our gear around, trying to get ready to break camp. And I hear this, kapow, kapow, kapow. And I see Coulter's face. He's going to get water. And he's just like, oh. And all of us, I don't know what you thought. I thought, he's running into a bear. We better go. So we kind of all grab our stuff. I get my gun because we're carrying pistols in case of bears. And we go up there, and Strat's just got this big damn smile on his face, and he's laughing. And I'm like, you ever heard of the boy who cried wolf? Really? He goes,
Mm-hmm.
just gonna wake you fellas up. He told me, and I believed him because that's the kind of guy I am. He goes, yeah, wolf burned through the meadow, and I was shooting at him. Come to find out, he's full of shit. He didn't see anything. So that was the morning of day 5. We got your bull into camp midday on
And
day
added
5.
irony before we move into day 5 is that we realize once we get back to camp and we're looking
Oh,
at Onyx, we
yeah,
realize the ridge top where that bull died, if he had just kept going and
right
plopped
up
off
there.
the side of that ridge, he would have landed on the ground probably 200 yards from our camp. So, but there just was no way down from there except to go
No,
back the way we came. So,
you would have been cliffed out for sure to get there. So day 5, we had spiked out, so we went back to our spike camp, recovered. Next morning, we get we get the horses. We have some mules. We load up all the meat on the mules. They have in reach to head back to the base camp to get mules to come into the kind of the main camp. And so as we ride in, the mules, I think, were already there,
mm-hmm.
and they ended up taking your elk back afternoon, and we're recovering. I'm pretty sore, and I'm thinking, I'll be all right. I'm just sore and tired, and I got a bruised left knee, but my right knee's kind of bugging me, but it'll be okay. And we go out that evening, and we're just gonna hunt from the main camp instead of spike camp. And we went to a different area, and Stripe was like, "Oh, I guarantee we're gonna find some elk over in this area." And we rode. I don't know, it wasn't that bad. It was probably 2 hours instead of
2 hours or
3 hours.
so.
We went into that should be like bullshit hill. We were like the most blowdown I have ever seen. It was the steepest ass mountain I have ever seen. And while it's doing, our forecast said it's supposed to start raining that night,
Yeah.
and it may rain all the next day, but we're still going to go out and at least try even to day 5. It is terrible, and my knee is starting to ache as we get up
Yeah,
there.
that was probably a 60-degree slope that we just went straight up.
Oh, it was terrible. But Coulter and Strite, they'll just like walk on a log all the way up there. Like, and you and I are just, I'm gasping. We get up about 3/4 of the way where we're trying to go, and this storm is just blowing in, and it's starting to rain. And I'm worried about the 60-degree slope we just came up. How the hell am I going to get down? It starts to look like the wind's going to get up, the rain's starting to come, and I'm like, fellas, we need to go. We start to descend, and it's at this point I realize my knee's not sore. It is hurt. I have twisted it somehow, and every step downhill is just excruciating pain. And so at that point, I'm kind of tripoding it. I got my trekking poles and my good knee, and I'm trying to hobble down through this mess. And I tell the guys, you guys just go ahead. I'm going to take as long as it takes. I'll get down there. And Stripe finally came back, and we kind of talked along the way on the way down. I had a good talk as I was grimacing with pain. We got to the bottom. We got rained on all the freaking way. I am soaked because I'm a dumbass. I didn't put on my rain pants because I was like, oh, it'll let up. It didn't let up. We get back to our horses at the bottom. Rained on us all the way in, and it was blowing and cold. And oh my God, it was. This is dry country. Rain like heck. Got back to camp, and all of us are freezing to death. In fact, Strite and Coulter had to just tie up their horses and go to the camp tent to get some warmth because they couldn't even hardly feel their hands. Luckily, Caitlin had everything cooked up. I had to go like change all my clothes essentially because everything was soaked to the bone. And then the forecast for the next day was kind of more of the same.
Yep.
And so now we've got last day. It's only 6 days. I've got a hurt knee, and it looks like it's going to be shit weather. So I told Stripe, I think we're done. we'll just, I'm not in shape to be able to hunt now at this point, unfortunately. No fault to anybody. It's just happened. I trained for this and just twisted a knee. So we had to cut it short on my piece, but it was a tremendous experience. And one thing it was, and I told you it would turn out this way on the way up. I think you were bitching at me about it being 31 hours up there, and you're like, I am never going this far for a hunt again. And I said, you just wait. You're going to get up there and shoot a big one and be ready to come back. So what say you now? You ready to go back?
I might go back to Montana. I might go back to Montana.
I,
Well, I
I got a
think I think
right on
logistically it
now.
was like 13 days or something, like 12, 13 days total on with the travel on the front end and the hunt and then the
Yeah.
travel on the back end. And it was just like, I'm not sure how many times logistically I could make that work, but it was an adventure that I would definitely do again given the
Yeah.
opportunity for sure.
Yeah. Well, I gotta really
And
credit Strike.
in hindsight, we trusted the weather man, which is
That was not smart.
not the best. But in hindsight, we 100% should have left you in that basin
Yes.
after we, as I was going with somebody to take my meat back to the base camp. We absolutely
Yep.
should have left you in there to go back up there and
Yep.
find one of those
Yeah.
other bulls.
I know I tried to talk him into that, and I understand the weather forecast said it was going to be shit for like 2 days, and it turned out it wasn't. It rained one evening, and that was it. It would have been pretty miserable underneath that tarp when it rained like hell that one night, but I agree, and if I could do anything else again, I would over again. I would have stayed, like you say, instead of packing out that morning of day 5 back to camp with y'all. I should have stayed there, and I should have Coulter should have stayed with me, and we could have made that work. But it was a great experience. I feel fortunate to have met Strike and Caitlin and Coulter.
Mm-hmm.
They made the trip. It was fun.
Absolutely.
They have great stock. I am not the cowboy I used to be when I was a young man. I was kidding you that you're going to want to buy a Stetson by the time you get done with this, but I don't think you're going to want to go do that
No,
probably.
no, no. I
Yeah.
am not. I'm not a horseman. I could get on a horse again, but I am not. I am not a horse hunter for sure.
But it was
Um,
it
but
was not something I'll forget.
I will say, after a day and a half or whatever it was, 2.5 days, almost 2 days, getting the stirrups adjusted to the appropriate length totally changed the rest of the week for
Yeah.
me. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, the only regret I have is that we wasted that last day of hunting going to that rainforesty, horrific, um, blow down mountain instead of just staying in that basin we'd been in where we knew there were elk. But
I agree. We did the sin of elk hunters is we left elk to find elk.
yep,
Yeah. But you live and you learn, and I'm not bitter about that. It was a great trip. I am tickled pink that you got your bull, and I know that was like your big opportunity to go on a big guided hunt, and it worked out for you. And I know that was something that your dad wanted for you too. That he was like, I hope you get to go do that, and you connected, and we all made it happen, and it's a memory of mine too. And I want to publicly thank you as well, because Joel was gracious enough to gift me a hindquarter, which is some choice meat, and I really appreciate that. And I butchered that as soon as I get home, and I really enjoy elk meat, and I really appreciate that, Joel, because I won't have an elk for myself this year. So thank you again for that.
absolutely.
So
I figured in that moment he could have gone in one of two directions, and he just happened to go to my direction, and it
yep,
didn't work out that we had another opportunity for you to get a shot on a bull. And it's like, the year that we went to the undisclosed location and Travis shot his elk, and neither one of us punched a tag. He was nice enough to gift me one, and I thought, that that's the right thing to do for somebody who worked so hard to to help make it all happen. So
well, I really appreciate it, and again, and also when you shot your bull, the weight lifted off of me of all the responsibility of picking the outfitter and the
Yeah,
location and all that. So I'm glad it all worked out. And I would do the same for you. Absolutely. I'd give you your choice of the hind quarter as well. So that will not go to waste. It'll get 100% utilized. And I hope it's not the last elk hunt we get to go on together. I know we've already got
definitely
kind of
not.
separate plans for next year, but after that we'll probably reconnect for sure. But I know I've kept you quite a time, but I wanted to record all this and kind of get it down before it kind of drifts away in my gray matter and I can't remember it all. The ride home, I've got to say this: we were celebrities all the way home because we've got this beautiful big elk rack in my back of my pickup. Even though we got Texas tags all the way through Montana, all the way through Wyoming into Colorado, people were pulling up next to us, thumbs up every time we'd stop at a gas station. People had to come take pictures. They want to know what happened. Where'd you get it? That's a beautiful elk. I mean, it was really cool.
Yeah, that was fun. People honking the horn
Yep.
as they pass us on the freeway,
Yep.
giving us a thumbs up, and just like the people taking pictures was probably the funniest.
It was
It's
it
like
was funny. Yeah.
it was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm wrapping it up, Joel. Anything else I didn't cover? Anything else you want to share?
I mean, I would just say that I don't know. It's funny, on a wild game cooking podcast. I just want to add that I have processed. I have killed 3 cow elk previous to this year. The first year, I outsourced the processing to somebody else, which I'll never do again. The second and third elk, I did myself and probably took 12, 14 hours total of like
Yeah.
cutting everything up. But the size difference in
It's
some of the
big.
cuts of meat between those cows, and some of those cows were big, and
They're
this
big
bull,
cows. Yeah.
it was like I almost couldn't recognize when I was taking apart that rear quarter. I almost
Yep.
didn't recognize some of the cuts of meat because they were like twice the size of what I was used to,
They're
which
huge.
is pretty awesome.
Yeah. It makes your processing of a whitetail seem much easier after you do an elk. It's
Yeah,
like, oh, these things are tiny.
yeah.
So, well, Joel,
So
I really it's one for the books, and I'll never forget it. Thank you for going with me. Thank you for reaching out to me and wanting to hunt with me,
yeah,
and us planning it together. And thank you for our trip to an undisclosed location in fall of 2023, and this one as well. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm glad we talk this through on the podcast. And again, congratulations on a beautiful bull.
thank
That's
you.
one that I know you'll never forget, and I'll never forget.
Yep.
All right, well, that wraps it up for this podcast, and thank you, everybody. Good night and good luck.
I want you to know it's over.